so we'll keep it light. And it is light. Always it is light, as you know. There is no death. This human journey, you wear your shell for a while until you're done with your work, and you cast it off, and when you take your coat off and when you take your suit off, you don't disappear, do you? No. You take off the suit and you move on and put on another suit. So there is no death. Only in the human adventure is the illusion of death created, for purposes of fear, partially, but also so that there has been an intense focus upon the content of the life. If you think, and you are a young child, if you think you're going to live forever, you're going to take an entirely different view of your life, and it's going to be an entirely different experience than if you think that your years are few. And so there's a focus of concentration that has been necessary during the time of the duality, when death was viewed not as transformation but as a finality, at least the end of the earth experience, if not the end of all experience. Death is not anything. It isn't worth talking about. It isn't worth examining. It's simply the curtain ringing down on a particular act of an endless play. If the play has act after act after act, you're not going to weep when the curtain comes down each time. You know that there's going to be more to come. The life that you are enjoying to one degree or another now is the blink of an eye, and yet it is as important as eternity itself. Your focus upon particular issues is vital for the life experience. I want to talk about the question of abortion that is dividing your society at present. It is no simple matter. If it is your belief that life, meaningful life, human life, begins with conception, then it may easily lead to the belief that abortion is murder, the deliberate taking of a life. I say to you, abortion can be murder. Generally, it's not. Why can it be sometimes? The question is motivation. The question is individual reality. Are you a poor person with 5 or 6 children, barely surviving? You become pregnant? You say, no, I can't take any more. You have that right. You have that right to choose. You always have that free will and free right to choose everything in your life. Now, if you choose wrong, according to some higher standard, are you doomed to hell, the flames, the fires forever? Of course not. When you make a choice, and upon later viewing and later understanding, you say, oh, that wasn't the choice I should have made, you will always have an opportunity to rectify that choice in this life or some other life. You are here to learn. You are here to grow. You are not here to be punished and to fail. The term and idea of karma has long been misunderstood as being some sort of punishment. Well, if I do wrong, I'm going to have to pay for it in punishment. But that's not the case. That's not the case at all. All is learning. If the child, the fresh infant, makes a mistake in his learning progress, you say, oh, isn't that cute? Well, you try again. Try again now. You don't say, don't do that. Not if you're a wise parent who understands that as much is learned through trial and error as it is possible to be learned. And so the question of abortion is an intensely subjective question. Are you aborting your child because the timing is inconvenient for you? You have the right to do that. You have the right to say, I just don't want to do that now. And later you may say, I wish I hadn't made that choice. Or you may say, boy, I'm glad I made that choice. Either way, it's legitimate. It is legitimate. Motivation counts for plenty in terms of your own growth and the rise of your own understanding. But there is no punitive element in it. Everything is alive. Everything is related. All things on heaven and on earth are of and inseparable from God. You cannot make a choice that is not in tune with God's will, because all of this exists as God's will. It is God's will for you to learn. If you could learn and choose correctly every time, there would be no point in this whole human process. You learn best through error. You learn faith best through trial. When the sun is shining and everything's going right, faith is a simple matter. And you feel a warm glow. You say, how full of faith am I? And then the world crashes around you. And nothing makes any sense anymore. And finally there is only that thin sliver of faith for you to cling to. Is it there? Is it gone? That's when it builds. When it's under fire, under attack. When you think, do I have faith? Do I believe? If all of that I have believed is true, then why is this happening to me? I don't understand. That's faith. When you say, I don't understand, and you don't give up, you say, I don't understand. That doesn't mean that what is taking place is not understandable, that it is malicious. It means that in your current level of development, you simply don't understand. It also means that in many cases, you're not supposed to understand on the intellectual ego level. You're supposed to respond. And so you do, and so you grow. When does the soul enter the human embryo? It varies. Understand that in the wider reality, which is your true home and your continuous existence, in the wider reality, when you enter into human life, you enter into the fetal form, full of memory and understanding of who you are and why you're doing what you are doing. Then you go into a dream. And in that dream, you dream of the past, and you dream of the future. You dream your way into your new shape and your new form and your new function. You are entering into the world of time, out of the world of timelessness. You must relearn the rules of dealing with time. And it takes time for you to make the internal soul adjustments that are necessary in renewing your acquaintance with human living. And so, by consent, by agreement at the higher self level, say, I'm going to be your child, and I'm going to enter into you, and you're going to trigger this and that in me, and I'm going to provide you with this blessing and this challenge. And you make all of your agreements on that higher self level. Now, the human mother, in her ego consciousness, is not aware, generally, of that agreement. Even if she understands it theoretically, she doesn't remember it. It's not a part of her memory. It's accepted on faith, but there's a purpose here. The spirit entering into the mother into the embryo is fully aware. And as it releases that awareness into the body of the mother and into and through that body into space and into time, it begins to dream that dream that will form the new life. As I say, that takes some time. It varies as to the time that takes. Now, aside from needing the time to adjust, needing the time of deep, deep meditation to prepare yourself for the shock of new birth, in addition to that, there is often a need for bonding with the mother. Where there are deep issues between mother and child, and that's often but not always the case. Sometimes the issues are with the father. Sometimes they're not often, but sometimes they are with someone aside from the parents in largest degree. Usually the relationship between parent and child, whether it is father or mother, is a highly potent one. But particularly the relationship with the mother, the human giver of life. And so the psychic connection that is formed between mother and unborn child needs to take place. That isn't going to take place with a soulless embryo, with just flesh and blood and bone forming. It's not going to take place. There has to be the soul present. Sometimes it's present through the entire pregnancy. More often, it is present during the final 5 months, approximately 5 months of the pregnancy. But that time is needed. There is enough sophistication in the form of the embryo so that the spirit may enter it and not be utterly quiescent. Entering into time is no great pleasure. There's a great deal of boredom and finger tapping and waiting, and you don't want to spend, if you can help it, you don't want to spend 9 months tapping your foot and waiting to be born. So this process of adjustment that is necessary is not an extremely long process. Usually a month or 2 is plenty for that to take place. When there is an additional need for bonding with the mother, as I say, the last 5 months of the pregnancy is usually sufficient for that. Where there are special needs and special cases, then it will be the entire pregnancy. But I say to you this, in those cases where the spirit is present practically from conception, there isn't going to be an abortion. That's part of the agreement too. Whether it's circumstances or overt decision, there simply isn't going to be an abortion. Life, once agreed upon, will not be ended unless that is a part of the deal. That is so rare. Very, very rare. It's very special circumstances and heavily karmic. There's no one present, for example, who has had that in any lifetime I can discern. So by and large, we're dealing with a non-issue, except subjectively. So on an objective level, you are never going to be taking a life against its will. You're never going to be taking a life really at all. There's going to be an agreement. Now, if you choose to abort after the 4th month, then we would say, this is something that you need to think about a great deal. But seldom is that performed. Now, subjectively, the human mother is the one that is making the choice. It is a vital choice, always. Whatever is decided, it is a vital choice. Vital to the mother, partly through societal considerations, but also on an eternal soul level. What do I need? How do I discern what I need? Is this situation impossible? Or does it merely look impossible? I spoke earlier of the poor mother who's got 5 or 6 children and can't imagine how she can support another. Well, she certainly has every right to decide, I can't support another. But she also has the right to choose in the other direction and discover that there is always enough when that choice is made. Are we going to lose a Beethoven? Well, there's never a loss. Never a loss. But subjectively, the woman must go through that process, and sometimes accompanied by great guilt, and sometimes followed by great regret. This is in her path of understanding when that takes place. It must take place. There must be that internal analysis. Very often, the child that has been aborted through a poor decision of the mothers, in other words, a decision based on fear. When that decision is made, very often that mother in the very same life will again have the opportunity to greet or to reject that soul. Nothing is ever escaped or skipped. And so the overview of this is that the question of abortion as it is looked upon in this culture at this time is seen as black or white with no shades of gray. And indeed, it is all shades of gray and black and white. It is very, very subjective. There are very few rules of thumb involved in this process. Life will always triumph because life is all there is. Death is always an illusion based only upon the limitations of human understanding. Now, you're moving into a time where your understanding is more than human, or at least is redefining what is human. Young Hannibal. That's who he is, you know. A life to be filled with exploration. Exploration, yes. It's going to be very much of a brave explorer. But an explorer not only of the land and the sea and the air, but an explorer primarily within. This is one who contains within himself all of the experiences of the Piscean age, distilled, deep compassion, great awareness, really a vehicle of the Christ energy, will be involved in the transformation of many humans. First and foremost. First and foremost. So the question of life and death. Looked at abortion, look at other matters. The taking of life. Let us say the question of capital punishment. An eye for an eye, and a tooth for a tooth. Set an example. If you do this or if you do that, we're going to kill you. Well, it's a hangover. It's very silly, very pointless, but again, on a subjective level, very important. Very important. The choice must be made by the jurors, by the judge, and by the governor, who may give pardon or not, and by the executioner, and by all of those who applaud or condemn the sentence of death. So while I, at the same time, say that death is not important at all since it's not real, in human society, death is very, very important because it's believed to be real. Because it's God power being used. When you use God power to apparently take life, you are abusing God power. take human life. The animals are a whole other question, and if we have any animal rightists here, I'd be glad to get into that question. But dealing here with human beings, if you condemn a human being to death, you are exceeding your responsibility. The human doesn't die, the human is transformed into, goes back to the home office and does it again till he gets it right. This whole question of punishment is based, of course, upon fear. You say, well, what alternative is there? Well, there really isn't. There really isn't much alternative in a world ruled by fear. But that world and the humanity that populates it is in transition. Now, am I going to say to you there's going to be no crime and no violence? Well, ultimately, that's going to be pretty true, but ultimately is a good distance from here. How do we deal with matters in the meantime? How do we deal with those who would exceed their responsibility, take life, take property, cause damage? Do we smilingly turn the other cheek? No, that's a gross misapprehension of the message of Christ. It is not that at all. We must behave as human beings maturely. If someone threatens your life, takes another life, does something equivalently naughty, then that person must be separated from the society. But put into prison and punished with pain and humiliation? No, of course not. You understand, as you grow into your God self, the deep compassion that you have when your child makes a mistake, a serious mistake. Now, if you are a wise parent, you're not going to beat that child. You're not going to lock that child in the basement. You're going to use the occasion of his mistake to teach him, to open to him the understanding of the nature of that mistake. If the child refuses to learn that lesson, then there must be restrictions upon his activity. But again, not with the motivation of revenge, but with the recognition that he does not yet understand. You must not take what you have not given. That gift of life on earth is an extension of the gift of life eternal. Cannot be taken away. And yet there are those who come into this world choosing that, wanting, needing to be executed, to be murdered. You need someone else to cooperate, maybe several someone else's to cooperate in that. And so what I'm saying is that you must recognize that the overall human reality is made up of 1,000 separate subjective realities, every one of them having its own legitimacy for the individual and those the individual is agreed with to create a situation and to deal with a situation in a positive or negative manner. All things are relative. Yet if there is to be a society, there must be general understandings of what is tolerated and what is not. But those understandings must be applied with love and forgiveness, with understanding. You are learning to be gods, and so you must act as gods. You are growing a new society. As I've said many times, you are connecting with each other on a psychic spiritual level as you go through your process of transformation. When all of the society has completed that, all human beings will be as one, still individual, but so connected with each other that you could no more slit someone else's throat than you could slit your own. Well, today you could do that, either one. But in the future you will not. You won't steal from someone for one reason, because they'd know. But for the most important reason, because you wouldn't have the desire to do that. So a new society is evolving that will be both individual and collective. And these matters that we're discussing tonight will be completely extraneous. But we're dealing with now. We're dealing with the construction of a new reality, a new way of looking at things. How can you bring these matters into life during your own existence here on earth? By lending your voice, lending your vote, lending your opinion and persuasion to the higher understanding that is coming into your life. It is not for you of the new age to stand apart, neither to judge nor to withdraw from the rest of human society. You are the revolutionaries, you are the reformers. You need to use your higher understanding, your deeper awareness for the good of all, especially those who don't believe what you believe, don't understand what you understand, and decry and deny what you know to be true. You need to become active, conscious, aware of who you are and what is coming to be. And so when you read of an injustice, don't just shake your head and click your tongue. Do what you can do to correct that injustice, whether it's writing a letter to the editor, or writing your congressman, or voting in a particular way, or speaking at a meeting, or forming a protest. Do something. You cannot be idle. You cannot cling to these truths and hold them inside of you. They are for everyone to share, and you will be doing your part in raising consciousness, raising a new level of awareness by speaking, whether it is to your family or to your friends, to your co-workers. When in your enlightened state of mind, you see taking place in society or in the workplace or in the home or in the neighborhood something that you know should not be, you have a responsibility and you have the ability to respond. It is necessary. This is not a time for the cloister, not a time to consort only with each other, not a time to say, well, this old structure is collapsing anyway, and someday it's all going to be heaven. That's pie in the sky. You need to create the reality. I can say to you, yes, this is the movement of the ages. This is the end of the Piscean age. This is the beginning of the Aquarian age. This is the direction humanity is heading. And humanity will get there, whether you do anything or not. But you are not without power. You can advance the process. And in the process of advancing the process, you can do wonderful good for your own process. To stand up and speak your heart and your mind. To enact the reality that is growing within you. That is what is vital. Do no longer stand on the sidelines. No longer be intimidated by those who think, oh, bosh, I don't believe what you're talking about. Nonetheless, walk your talk. This is no simple, distant matter. This is immediate. This is vital. Look in your newspapers. Watch your television set. Look around you. See what is taking place in your society. I have said before, you are entering into a time of great repression, when the forces of fundamentalism, the forces of keeping things as they are or how we think they should be, are going to be trying to stifle change and growth are going to be terribly, terribly frightened by this new vision, who are going to cling desperately to the old, fading, crumbling realities, and they can make things mighty hot for you before they inevitably lose. They can win many a battle before they lose the war. Don't stand idly by. Create the new creation. This is the whole point. This is the end of the Piscean Age. This is the end of martyrdom. This is the end of suffering in silence. It is time for change. You, in empowering yourself through your process of transformation, first, of course, and all the time I've been speaking, all these many years now, the focus has been on the self. Must be there first. If it's not there, it's not anywhere. But now, you're going through the birth canal, you're coming out the other side, you are new. You've done it. And now you must help to midwife the rest of humanity. And many will deny you. And many will deny the truths. And some will never speak to you again. And some will call you crazy. But it is your responsibility to use the power that you have founded in yourself. The power of love. The power of a wider understanding. The power of an ego self uniting with higher self. You are immeasurably more influential because of that uniting than you have ever been. And you won't know it until you enact it. The early Christians needed to stand aside from politics for a good long time, several hundred years. Because they didn't have any voice in it. Because they were beginning the age of Pisces, the age of suffering, the age of loss, the age of the crucifixion. This is the age of the rising, of the triumph of life over death. This is the promise of the Christ. You're done experimenting and experiencing death, destruction, pain, loss, crucifixion. Everywhere you see injustice, rise up. Rise up. Do everything in your power. You alone are not going to save the world. You collectively are guaranteed to save the world. In your own life, choose what your heart says is right. You can trust your heart. Is it going to be in absolute agreement with the person sitting next to you? Probably not. Probably not. You're a different person. United at the heart, but individualized for purpose. Make your own choices. Don't be sheep. The sheep and the shepherd, those are the concepts of the old. I've said you don't need leaders anymore. Why? Because you're leaders. You are your own leader. So lead yourself into battle against those who would stifle freedom, against those who would cause death, against those who would ensure suffering, against those who would limit choice, against those who say, my way or no way. Now you are scattered. Now you are few. But this war to find peace is inevitably yours to win. Your numbers grow. You connect more and more with each other. You protect and you defend each other. You enlighten each other. And together, you will bring all humanity through the valley of the shadow, which is fear, into the light of rebirth. This is all taking place now, and I speak these words with the urgency of present need. Beginning next year, the skid is going to be fast and violent as the structures begin more clearly to crumble and their defenders more hysterically trying to sustain them. You are seeing it already in the judiciary of your country. The withdrawal of freedoms and liberties. You are seeing it everywhere in the fabric of your society. Inevitably seen first in its leadership. Those who are most involved in things as they are. The powerful, the wealthy. The ones that have the law on their side. And if they don't, will change the law until it is on their side. Everything in the name of sustaining what has been. And they will make it sound wonderful to those ready to believe them. They will make change seem odious and frightening, undermining the values of the last 2,000 years. You're damn right they are. That's what's supposed to happen. You are in the cauldron now, and for this decade. By the end of this decade, you will begin to see victory. But you are entering now into the night time, into the darkness. Your own lights learning to glow with stronger and stronger power, collectively with stronger power yet. Begin the rebuilding process before the destruction is complete. You have nothing to fear, you see. You can't lose. The ones you are ranged against are scared to death and scared of death. The death of everything they base their lives upon. Physical death, emotional death, moral death. Ruled by the fear of death. And yet committed to a life of living death. A denial of life. A denial of the possibilities of freedom, of choice. Afraid of themselves and of all humanity. Wanting to choose for you because they don't trust you to choose. Because you might not choose what they choose. You are revolutionaries. And you're not going to have to take to the hills, and you're not going to have to shoot anybody. Hopefully. But you are going to have to defend your beliefs. Are you going to be Peter and deny what you know to be true, and again deny what you know to be true, and again deny what you know to be true? You must be courageous. You must speak your truth, come hell or high water, to be true to yourself. You need to understand the God within you. And only through your courage and your faith will you find that God and believe in that God and say, yes, though 100,000 are ranged against me, I will proclaim this truth. We're talking about life and death situations. And in great and awful clarity during this decade, the forces of life and the forces of death face each other in final struggle. The forces of life must win out. There is no death. Those who believe in death believe in fear and breathe life into it. But it isn't real. Reality will win over hallucination. But do not underestimate the forces of fear and the forces of death while they are many and while their belief is powerful. That will change. The shift will come as it came within each and every one of you individually. At some point, you gradually changed your belief in death, your belief in fear, your belief in separation, your belief in loss and abandonment. Gradually you changed. Gradually you affirmed life, and affirmed truth, and affirmed love, and let go of the false notion of fear and of death. Humanity will go through and is going through the exact same process collectively as you have gone through individually. And because you are pioneers, because you are beginning the long parade into the light, it is for you. You chose this. I'm not laying it on you. You chose to go first so that you could proclaim the good and wonderful news of life everlasting. You cannot but abhor injustice and falsehood. The more you integrate higher self, the more you integrate Christ energy, the less tolerant you can be of falsehood, of delusion, of injustice. Express it. And be healed by it, and heal with it. Yes, I open for questions.
Plautus? I'm at kind of a big change point, being a new mother, and I have a record out that the success of seems to be very much tied to where I am inside of me.
Yes.
I mean, if I have a funky week, it tends to do less well on the market. And I'm wondering what I need to do to get this thing cooking.
Your creation, your creation is of your essence, as the child is of your essence. And so naturally what you say is true, that you can nurture this product of your soul. The timing is good for it. As you can see, looking back, it's been step by step by step. It has not been all of a sudden, and it couldn't be. You needed to learn and to grow at the pace that you did. But just as this has come into fruition in your life, so will your other creative children. And in the case of this particular production, I think it's going to be growing slowly and organically. It's not going to hit with a bang, but it is during the course of the summer going to go on a pretty steady incline upward. Was there some specific?
Yeah. Should I keep on the promoter who is working? I have somewhat mixed feelings, but I basically have positive ones, I think.
Give me the first name.
Rod Tremblay.
Yes. Perhaps an imperfect vessel, but a usable one. He's not going to cheat you. He wants to do well for you. He is incomplete in his understanding of the purpose.
Of what?
Of the purpose of your work.
Oh, I'm sure.
But I don't see him as being negative at all. I would think, by and large, maybe you could do better, but I think this is pretty good.
Mm-hmm. Is there another person that
I think there's going to be coming along someone in June, probably within the next 2 to 3 weeks, who's going to be instrumental in providing a push.
Is this perhaps a woman that I met at the...
Will be a woman, yes.
With an Italian name? Or
I don't know. I don't see the name, but someone who is given to the big statement, who is bigger than life, who's got a lot of personal energy. Very...
promoter specifically, or?
Well, she looks like she certainly could be, based upon what I see in terms of that personal, expressive energy. Yes.
Thank you.
Well, it just feels like it's been a really extra hard time for me and just about everybody I know. And I understand what you're saying about needing to stand up, and that makes me kind of excited. Because at the same time, it feels like I need to hear some things about how we nurture ourselves through this.
I beg your pardon?
I'd like to hear some things about how we kind of take care of ourselves through this all. It just feels like things are really hard right now. And
all right. It's a very good question, and I have a very good answer for it. Don't. Now, deeply implicit in your process is the necessity of surrender, of recognition that you are not alone. The experience of feeling separate has been deeply a part of humanity's experience over these many centuries. That is, as I've said many times, an illusion. You're all one. And you are in the process of proving that to yourself. You are one not only with other human beings, you are one with God, you are one with your fate, you are one with your path. You are limited at the level of the ego consciousness, which is to say, the consciousness, the only consciousness you're generally aware of. That's changing now as you begin to integrate higher self-consciousness. But by and large, the ego consciousness is you awake. You're not alone, but the ego self is the last part of you to figure that out. You have to consciously make the choice. I don't have to, in the sense that you mean, I don't have to worry about taking care of myself. I am taken care of. I am being taken care of. I am one with my own healing. I no longer need the lessons of defeat and disaster. Let go of fear for the self. This is a perilous time for that ego consciousness. The ego consciousness is scared to death because of all that's going on that it doesn't understand. The ego consciousness is being invaded by an energy that it doesn't comprehend. Let's say the ego consciousness operates on one dimension. And suddenly a three-dimensional reality becomes a part of it. The ego consciousness can't see beyond one dimension. What is this undefinable invader into my life? Utter bafflement. Now, when the ego consciousness is baffled, it's dangerous. It begins to eat itself. It panics. It is enraged. Who's doing this to me? And scared to death. I'm helpless. Ignorance is not bliss. You need to help the ego consciousness make the transition that's going on. You can't force it, i.e., force yourself to understand. That understanding comes slowly. It's complete within you. But in the mind, there's a struggle to keep it out because it can't be defined by old terms. What does this mean? In the beginning of your conscious journey on the spiritual path, you thought you knew what was going to happen. The ego created an idea of spirituality it could live with. An idea that, oh, everything's wonderful. And a smile on the face and the suns and the sky, and I'm going to be above it all. The ego consciousness liked the sound of that. And it's been a terrible shock after shock after shock to discover that that isn't it. That that's not the goal and that's not the reality. And so now, and I've spoken before, now you're coming out of the birth canal and you're looking around, you're wondering, well, at that ego self level, and you're more than that in your meditation, in your thoughts and so forth, and you can be at home and you can be wonderfully, utterly at peace with the process that's going on, but you have to go out into the world. Then the ego consciousness takes over, and the ego consciousness is utterly bewildered. Here is this one reality it's gotten used to, may not be very good at living in it, but at least it's gotten used to it. And here's this other reality, undefinable, changing everything, but changing it into a form that is unrecognizable to the ego self. What's going on here? The ego self fights back, and it'll fight, and it'll attack at your weakest point, your weakest point, and your weakest point. Whoever you are, you will begin to try to kill yourself in your panic. This isn't like it was before, though. There's been fear all along. This isn't the same. You have gone through the death and rebirth. It's only that poor old layer of awareness that doesn't get it. And that's what's afraid. It thinks it's going to die. Yet I'm being absolutely literal. At the level of that ego self, it thinks it's going to die because it can no longer understand. It is no longer viable in its own old form. And so if your weakness, if your area of greatest vulnerability is in the mind, in the emotions, that's where it's going to attack. If your area of greatest vulnerability is in the physical self, that's where it's going to attack. It's going to attack in some way each and every one of you. This isn't you alone. It's not going to win, but it doesn't know that. You can't lose, but you're not sure of that. And so when you are attacked at that vulnerable point, this is all too new for you to be sure of it. How do you become sure of it? By going through the process you're going through and surviving and growing as a part of that process. What you have gone through was not disaster, but cleansing. Proving to that doubting ego self that you are stronger than you thought you were, greater than you thought you were, and that even though you don't know really what's going on, you're going to trust it. You won't be attacked with that strength again. There may be smaller attacks. The ego doesn't give up easily and it doesn't learn quickly. But you'll never be attacked to that degree again, because you triumphed by surviving. You wanted to die. That ego self wanted to die. Didn't want any part of this. And that's true of every one of you. At some level, the ego self feels itself under attack, and if it can't win, it will die. The ego self believes passionately in death, because the ego self dies. It only exists this lifetime. No wonder it's afraid. It tries to look beyond and sees nothing. That's going to end, you see, because you're integrating ego self with higher self. Gradually, ego self will calm down and say, well, something's going on. I still don't understand it, but it's okay. And then you build from there. You're going to get there quickly. This isn't a long process, but it's a very dynamic process while it goes on. Yes.
Thank you. About we're talking about abortion before.
Yes.
What's the issue about miscarriage?
I beg your pardon?
Miscarriage. Now the reason why I'm asking the question is because my girlfriend had a miscarriage.
Yeah.
A month and a half ago, so well, not quite a month ago. And I think both of us, at least from my part, both wanted the child. And she's really concerned about her ability to carry. This is her second miscarriage. Now, what's the issue between abortion is a voluntary act from the parents? Now, miscarriage is what?
All acts are voluntary. Some of them more obviously voluntary than others. If you're choosing to abort a child, well, it's very clear you're making a choice. But if you are choosing to miscarry a child, there's a choice involved there too, and at a higher level, you are clear about it. Now, what are the purposes of it? Well, the purposes are as many and varied as they are in the case of abortion. Now, in this case, it's simply a matter of timing. She will be able to undergo a complete pregnancy. The timing was not appropriate. So does that mean a mistake was made? No. What it is confirming her own fears regarding her ability to bear life to fruition. And so you find these apparently negative things going on. You say, oh, another nail in the coffin. And so fear builds up. But fear builds up only for one reason, so that it can be exploded. Finally. Now, it may take lives and lives and lives and lives till you finally explode the fear. You've built and built and built and built on it. But ultimately, the plunger goes down, the fear goes bang. Now, in this case, before the end of the year, yes, I want you to look yourself at the timing. To think, well, what if that had not occurred? What's likely to have happened? How is that likely to have impacted on my life and on her life? And you will see that it accomplished two things. One is the timing would have been terrible, and it would have been disastrous in both of your lives. Two, the fact that it happened was a bonding event for you and for her. Pain is often the source of deep bonding, shared pain. So there's purpose. There is always purpose in this, and the purpose is going to vary from individual to individual and case to case. But again, there isn't any real loss, not even a delay, because the timing wasn't appropriate. Yes?
Plautus, did this little accident of mine carry any message?
Well, I'm going to resist the desire to be sarcastic.
Why? You never did before.
That was sarcastic.
I'm looking. No, I don't really see any higher symbolic evidences here. Nothing beyond the obvious. Well, be more careful next time, and that sort of thing. But life is composed of 99% events that have no other significance than the event themselves. We focus upon those significant events that do have messages for us. But here, beyond the obvious of should I actually be doing this activity, there isn't any special message. You weren't being shaken to awaken you to some particular situation. It just happened.
May I ask another miscarriage question? My daughter's first pregnancy miscarried, and my feeling was her body was not ready, was not strong enough. Her eating habits were too bad, or her fear habits were. And one question is, did the same entity come in with her first living child? And
No.
Or the second?
Yes.
Oh, interesting. Was it? I'm trying to see what purpose was served, unless it was to show her that yes, she could conceive, even though that wasn't the right time for the conception to go all the way to birth.
Yes. It seems that what occurred there was, let's say, an agreement was made and then the agreement was altered. And why was the agreement altered? Because that soul, how can I put this that's reasonably accurate? That soul became aware that it shouldn't come in first. That for the purposes of that soul's life experience and interaction with the mother, it needed to be the second and not the first. And so it got out of line and went behind the other one. I'm trying to make this clear, but we're really dealing here with matters that there are no clear concepts in human language to be able to say this with absolute clarity, but only to say there is a constant dynamic and flow as reality is being created moment by moment by moment. It is a huge fresco that you are working on one small section at a time. It is not that everything is perfect and that there are no erasures as the plan is built and is executed. There are many erasures and many alterations. And you may be building a part of your fresco and say, no, I don't like the way that fits into the whole, and take out all the pieces and start again. So there's a constant flow of response, execution, reflection, alteration, and so forth. This is a dynamic, creative thing, this life and these interlocking lives that are being created. If you saw it in a slow motion film, you would see the flow going this way and subsiding and opening and swelling on one area, and you would see, seeing it slowly, you would see that while it's not random, there's a definite purpose, but it's like trial and error. It's like developing here and saying, no, we'll change and we'll go over here. Well, you don't see all of those alterations that are taking place in human form. But at the higher self form, you are constantly flowing, changing, accepting, denying, revising, and so forth. So this is a dynamic. And in this case, after a beginning was begun, they say, wait a minute, this is going to work better if we do it this way.
Something in the relationship between the two boys as well.
Oh yes.
Plautus, in your talk this evening, you talked about we should stand up and speak out and that kind of thing. Could you maybe elaborate a little more on the issue of responsibility and how we go about doing that? In that we should respect others and their realities also.
Oh yes, of course. You're not a dictator, and if you had the power, you wouldn't be a dictator. But you are a persuader, and you are one who can say, "This I believe." You know, it's not saying I'm right, you're wrong, but saying I'm right. You know, you need to say that I'm right. You need to have the courage of your convictions. This is no shilly-shally liberal sort of, well, everybody's got a point, and you're right here, and you're right here. You need to make choices for yourself based upon the illumination and your ability to receive and translate that illumination. And so it doesn't mean that you are totally right in some objective sense in everything. You're an individual, and you have prejudices, and you have beliefs, and you have contradictory beliefs. But it means that as your awareness opens and opens and opens, you have an obligation to yourself and to the process that's taking place to use your best understanding of that process and illuminate that for others. And where it is violated, to protest. You're not saying you're trying to invalidate everybody else. You're validating yourself. Because the purpose is positive, not negative. Yes, you are making judgments, and it's currently fashionable to say, don't judge. Well, you must judge. You're here to judge. God judges. But God is not an executioner. And so you make your judgments, but you make them for yourself. I believe this to be so, therefore I will publish this. I will announce this. I will support this. Doesn't mean the corollary of I believe you to be wrong, and so I will suppress you. That is out of fear, and that is what you're working against.
How about people that go on these protests where they starve themselves?
Well, I view that as being negative. There's a case to be made for it, and I'm sure in some individual cases it can probably be very well justified. But I think that what we're talking about is life-affirming actions, and that could easily be construed as not life-affirming. It's like saying, buy this book or I'll kill your dog. It's the equivalent of a child's tantruming. If you don't do what I say, I'm going to hold my breath until I turn blue and die. Well, it doesn't strike me as that's a very affirmative way to approach things by threat and extortion and coercion. I don't approve of it. There may be some times where it's legitimate under particular circumstances, but I don't recommend it.
In the work I do, I have a lot of opportunity to make suggestions and so forth. However, when I run into born-again Christians, I tread very carefully. There seems to be a volatility there.
Yes. Well, they are among those I'm talking about, the fundamentalists, those who are clinging to the past and trying to recreate the past, rigid in their outlook. So now when I say to you, proclaim your beliefs and proclaim them freely, I mean what I say. Doesn't mean you're going to necessarily convince everyone or anyone. You're doing it for you. You are doing it because it is necessary for you to support your vision of justice and truth. It doesn't mean that you're going to convince anyone. It doesn't mean you're going to stop anyone from their belief system. And there may be Christians who will say, well, you should be burned at the stake. Well, they're not going to burn you at the stake, though I'm sure many would dearly love to. But that has nothing to do. Their beliefs, the persons that you speak to, Christian or non-Christian, their beliefs aren't the concern here. It's your beliefs and the necessity for you to expound on yours. They need to expound on theirs. Well, theirs includes the suppression of yours, to expound on their beliefs. And that you can't allow. So you have to have strong boundaries. But it is a test of your faith and your courage to proclaim your vision of the truth despite the sneers, despite the opposition, despite the fact that there are going to be very few you're going to convert. You don't care about converting, you care about speaking the truth. Those who hear it, really hear it, will respond. There a seed will have been planted. Those who do not, cannot, choose not to, there the seed will fall on fallow ground. That's not up to you. The result isn't up to you. The action is up to you.
Plautus, I have memories of my mother trying to abort me. Was my soul in my body at the time, and what was going on with me?
The vision I have is that you were knocking at the door and she'd open it and then slam it in your face. So it's not that you were asking permission, in other words. You were saying, well, excuse me, but I'd like to come in now. And she was saying, no, bam, close the door. Fear on her part. Obviously, the door didn't stay closed. But we see very often a situation where, because the prospective parent, the prospective mother, sees, and the father can be involved in this too at an earlier stage, but the prospective mother sees on a intuitive level, oh boy, this is really going to test me. This is really going to be something I'm afraid of in some way or another. And I'm not ready for this. Bam, close the door. But if it's needful to be done, the door again will open a crack, and again will open a crack and close it, open it a crack, close it. And finally, the deed will be done. Sometimes it takes 2-3 lives for a particular mother to agree to the coming of a particular soul because of the issues to deal with. You may decide in the wider reality, at the higher self level, you may agree with that higher self who produces your mother that we're going to get together, we're going to finally do this, we're going to work this out this lifetime. But you come into the life and you're dealing with free will and what is often the free reign of fear. And so she has that right then to say, no, forget it. I changed my mind, I'm not going to do it. Sometimes it'll take a long time between the agreement and the execution of the agreement.
I had a hard time making decisions this summer, especially about what school to go to and what to do this summer. And just when I think I made the decision, something happens to make me think the opposite. And I was wondering if you could enlighten me as to what to do this summer. I mean, there's so many options open to me. I don't do anything because I have so many options that I can't choose.
Well, this is what I say when such a kind of a situation arises, is just choose arbitrarily. And you will find that what seems like an arbitrary choice is in fact a very carefully reasoned and understood choice at a higher level. And sometimes, as I say, the ego self doesn't see the implications and doesn't see how clearly things are going to develop. And so, and the intuition doesn't print in headline letters what it wants. And sometimes you think, well, I don't know if that's intuition or what, and sometimes I think one thing and sometimes I think the other. Well, you can go around and around like that, chasing your tail for forever. Finally, you have to say, well, forget it, I'm just going to do this. Believe that that wasn't as casual a choice as it might have felt. It wasn't as arbitrary as it might have felt. That what seems like an arbitrary choice is exactly what the heart wants to do. Just choose.
Plautus, do you see an opportunity to go to Australia this late summer or early fall as being an option and a good place to go?
I think for you, any opportunity to travel, to explore, to expand should be seized. That you do better in your growth, in your change, when you're not at home. That's not that uncommon. And so God, fate, your higher self will arrange for you to be not at home when it is necessary for you to make leaps in your understanding and in your growth. And I think should that materialize, and it looks about 75% likely now, that would be a great opportunity for you.
One that accompanying me?
No.
Question about the business. I feel really compelled to start a new venture, new restaurant. And I feel like I'm really mature for it. Am I correct in the feeling?
Yes, this is entirely appropriate, and the timing is now moving. You've mentioned this before, but and now I would say there's a go sign. Go right ahead and begin the process. You don't need to do shilly-shally any longer. You don't need to wait. You have launched that child, and now you want another one. That's fine. Have another child.
Is issue related to the classic missed fatherhood that I had, or not?
Well, yes, in a way it is, and the act of creation, it's the act of the artist, the act of God. To create is intrinsic to the human being. It's going to be expressed in a variety of ways. And how it's triggered and how powerfully it exists within you is going to often depend, at least partially, on that which you express, the question of being parented yourself. In many ways, you have the desire to have many children. Physical children, fleshly children, and children of the heart and children of the mind. You are very creative. You are overflowing with creative energy. If that creative energy is not channeled and utilized, you get very, very frustrated. Sometimes you tend to try to push the process and to create faster and faster and faster. And now you're learning to pace yourself better. But I say now, yes, now the time is ripe.
In Hawaii, especially in Maui, I had some rather marvelous inner experiences and feel like I must have been there many times before, and it's kind of like home in some respects. And it was almost hard to come back here. Am I preparing for a move to that part of the world, or is just going there every so often?
Well, it's good for you, and I would say to you this, that Hawaii is a place of powerful energy. It's not just the sunshine and the sandy beaches. It is a place of deep and powerful Atlantean energy. Specifically, Atlantean energy. It is a, how could I say, it is a survival of a portion of Atlantis, the earthly Atlantis, pushed up from the bottom of the sea. Yes.
And so when I feel the movement inside me being there,
you're responding to old ancestral memories.
Past lives as well as lineage.
Yes. Yes.
And so is my discomforted being here just me running into the old me, or is it literally?
I think it's a lot that. It's a lot that. You know, it's a lot that. When you are, that's why so many people move during this transformation process, because you feel so different. That when you are in what was a familiar home, a familiar place, it no longer seems familiar, it no longer seems to fit. It may feel limiting, like a cage. It is the desire to see yourself anew and in a new environment. Many people feel this strongly. They may not leave the area, but they'll leave their apartment, or they'll change their home, or they'll move to a different part of town. But others will go farther than that to change the setting to match the new sense of self.
I just did it 1.5 years ago, so I'm kind of yikes.
Oh, you're going to do it 2-3 more times.
I'm sure.
It's a part of your nature to move.
Plautus, I just wondered if you could give me something in a sense of timing and any other words you have about what's going on between Kirsten and I and that healing?
Well, as I've indicated, it's a time for separation. It's a time for walking a separate, parallel, but separate path for a time. What is that time? You know, I really hate to get pinned down to this because it's not that I don't know, mind you, but I don't know. I don't know because you have free will. And I can say, well, it looks like, and I'll go that far, I'll say it looks like. If you follow your separate paths, it's not full of anger or anything, it's just a recognition of the need to walk separately for a time, that within a month or two, that process will have completed itself. It's not a long-term thing. You're all involved in the acceleration of events, and that's internal events as well as external events. You've got to match the flow of speeding time. And if you, so you're going to get more spontaneous in your responses as you grow more attuned to your own intuition. And so for now, I would say just take that separate path. It's going to lead you and it's going to lead her into a separate process that leads again toward a greater understanding when you come back together. A month, 2 months.
The Jews are still waiting for their Messiah to come, and I was wondering if a Messiah that was as powerful as Jesus was in his time will come into our lifetime.
Well, as I've said before, everyone has been, Christians that is, have been waiting for Christ to return, and the Jews have been waiting for the Messiah, and it's already taken place. Christ has returned, and there's some fellow that says he's off somewhere in Europe now, but he's quite mad. Because the whole point, you see, we're moving from the Piscean age into the Aquarian age. We're moving from the individual into the collective. We're moving from the material into the spiritual. And so Christ, that energy appearing in human form at the beginning of this age, returns to complete and to launch the new age as energy. And it is the Christ energy, that grace of and transformative power of the Christ, that you are drawing into you through your own responses, through your own process. That is the return. And it's not limited to those who call themselves Christians. It is a universal energy that is called by different names in different places. As for the Jews, well, the Christians aren't going to recognize, by and large, Christians as you understand them traditionally, aren't going to recognize the existence or reality of a Christ energy that doesn't come in human form descending from the clouds. And so they're going to be very resistant to that. And the Jews who've been waiting for a particular description of a Messiah are going to be off looking in the wrong direction too. But human individuals, forgetting whether you were born Jewish or born Christian or born Hindu or born anything, you, in your own process, that maturing soul, when you are ready to receive the transformative energy, however you care to label it, you will. And I deal with the Christian concept because that's primarily the mission that I'm involved in. But it is a universal energy. And those who wait for something else wait in vain. Now, they may not always think that they're waiting in vain, because there are those false prophets and those false messiahs who will arise and say, I am the one. And some will follow. But I say to you, Christ is in you and among us today.
Could you clarify the difference between the Maitreya and the Christ energy?
Maitreya, yes, that's the one. The difference, oh dear, it's a philosophical, ego-oriented construction versus a reality. And I say to you, listen to yourself, listen to your heart. I did a lecture on this some time ago on false prophets. And there are many, and many of them are very sincere and quite mad, and some of them are very insincere. But whether they are sincere or insincere, there is a great deal of false information. Now, that's not bad, it simply is. And you have in the Christ-enhanced, Spirit-enhanced intuition at your disposal the ability to see through the false and to find the real. And generally, the real is much simpler than the false. The false will come along with a great deal of justifications and a great philosophical structure and rules and regulations, particularly. And so judge through your own heart. I can't address myself to what is the difference between this and that, except to say that one is a construct and the other is real. I'm going to draw this reading to a close, and I thank you for your attention and bid you Godspeed as you move into the life that is eternal.